Hi everyone, and welcome back to the second session of the morning. I hope you all enjoyed the Cyber Executives panel that you were just in. It was really insightful and there was a lot of really good takeaways from that, and I really appreciate the guys jumping on and sharing their insights. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker for the morning, Jared Pagonis. We'll be discussing changing cyber landscapes, the battle of algorithms. Jared is a commercial director at Darktrace, based in Melbourne. Jared is responsible for educating the market on harnessing the power of AI in an ever-changing threat landscape. He works closely with CISOs and IT experts to understand their unique security challenges and how Darktrace can help address these concerns. Prior to joining Darktrace, Jared worked in the IT industry for numerous years and holds a Bachelor of Business from Monash with majors in strategy and international business. So Jared, I will leave the floor with you and let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Much appreciated. I'm excited to talk to you guys today about this topic. It's one that I hold very close to my heart, given the company that I work for. And it is obviously a topic, artificial intelligence, that comes up pretty frequently. We deal with AI, machine learning, algorithms every day, whether it's trying to find our next movie, scrolling through social media, or just trying to generally empower business functions and create more efficiency. But one that I feel we're not talking nearly enough about is the impact that it's going to have on the cyber landscape moving forward, and how both sides will be relying on it for both its speed and power. And today, of course, I'm going to be talking to you guys about Darktrace and how we're using artificial intelligence to defend organizations. But also on the other side of the coin, I'm going to be talking about how AI will supercharge cyber threat and the likelihood, of a clash of titans of offensive and defensive AI in the very near future. But before I get into that, I'm just going to give anyone that doesn't know about the company that I work for, Darktrace, just a quick preview. We're the world leaders and first to market in artificial intelligence for cyber defense. We were founded back in 2013 by mathematicians out of the University of Cambridge and cybersecurity experts out of MI5 and GCHQ. And since then, our growth has been rapid. And we've also been the creators of the Cyber AI Analyst and autonomous response technology. And really the success of our cloud native platform has been born from our ability to defend against not just modern day attacks, but also future-proof against what's to come. And what I mean by that is sort of the paradigm shift that we're currently going through. And we're living in this right now. And I'm sure everyone is fully aware of this, that the dynamic workforce is expanding, and therefore the attack surface is expanding. We're relying more on cloud, more on SaaS applications, more people working from home. And there's a lot more blind spots for organizations. We're seeing medical centers, education facilities, and critical infrastructure as prime targets. And that means that cyber attacks also have physical consequences. And 2020 was actually the first year that we could attribute a death to a cyber incident where a patient could no longer receive care at a hospital because their systems went down. And then, of course, we had our Prime Minister in Australia come out and speak publicly about the threat of nation-state attacks, and that it's not just for government organizations, but also for the private sector as well, with corporations and businesses fully needing to armed up against what is now the go-to weapon for nation states. And then, of course, if you guys have ever heard Darktrace and our experts talk, we've been singing to the hills about artificial intelligence-based attacks, and they're very much here. They've been on our doorstep for a long time, and it's going to make defending our vital systems and data much more difficult. And what I mean about artificial intelligence-based attacks is ultimately offensive AI or AI-based malware. And that's ultimately taking the fundamental ability to learn and then adapt to ultimately usher in a whole new era of highly custodial malware that's going to be able to blend into environments at unseen speed and scale. The idea will be to mimic how humans operate within an organization and not necessarily steal data. Of course, they're going to be able to do this in large quantities, but it might just be about manipulating or changing data within an organization. much more discreet, but still can have quite the dire consequences. So the game is really going to change for the bad guys. They'll be able to have minimum chance of detection and optimum chance of success. So what we're going to see is that traditional security tools are going to be impotent against the new threat as they're relying on pre-modeled activity. And so this is obviously something that we know very well at Darktrace, but of course you guys know your challenges better than I do. And Forrester had actually taken insights from across the industry, and a few of those are that 88% anticipate AI-driven attacks will become mainstream. 77% predict that or think that scale and speed of attacks will increase, and 83% believe AI augmentation is necessary for defense. So overall, more aggressive threats and harder for security teams to defend against. And I want to give you guys a very quick example, a very nice, easy one to wrap your head around if you're not already aware of it, is spoofing attacks. Now, everyone's seen what I'm showing you on screen here. This is a spoofing attack of the past. The flow of the email is all wrong. It's got spelling mistakes. It's got big bold headings, and it's non-convincing and clearly spam. Something that anyone will be able to identify as a threat. Spoofing attacks of the present. Now, these take a much bigger step up. They're a lot more subtle. However, there's still often inconsistencies in the style language, and sometimes the domain name is portrayed. But ultimately, a lot of attacks do start in email, so clearly these are still working. But if you're an educated user, you should be able to identify. And then finally, spoofing attacks of the future. This is utilizing the power of artificial intelligence. A big part of these spoofing attacks is the reconnaissance work done prior to the email. Typically, this would take a human user maybe months, maybe weeks, to build out exactly how someone would talk or how they interact within the organization. This would take the AI seconds, maybe minutes. And then, of course, they can really distinguish themselves or make it difficult to distinguish themselves from genuine communication. The email you see here is legitimate. Julie Rodriguez, I guess, would often speak to Jonathan like this. There would be almost no way of telling the difference between malicious and non-malicious, which is really a scary thought when we think about the threat that already is in email and the threat moving forward. So our only real hope of defending against something like this, because we can't rely on humans to defend against this, is artificial intelligence. And so here at Darktrace, what we're doing is using the immune system approach base the fundamentals of our technology on. So the analogy, obviously being the human body, is that humans, when we get bacteria and viruses, we don't have a set blacklist of what is bad. We identify bad by what is happening, by what is normal. And anything that is strange within the human body, we will take action and respond to it instantaneously. That's exactly how Darktrace works. So we look for the strange behavior within an organization. We know what is normal for every device, and it's entirely self-learning. So there's no rules, there's no fixed baseline. It's able to detect unpredictable novel cyber threats across the entirety of a network, whether that's SaaS, cloud, IoT, wherever it might be. And our platform that we have is underpinned by 3 key pillars. And that is the enterprise immune system, which is our self-learning detection, the cyber AI analyst, which is the automated investigation, and Darktrace Antigena, which is our autonomous response. And I'm going to get to that last one in more detail shortly. But for the first 2, the self-learning detection is exactly what I just spoke about, the ability to understand what is normal and therefore find early indicators of threat through anomalous activity. Then we have our cyber AI analyst, which is the automated investigation. So this is the ability to do the thinking. It's able to take all that anomalous activity, understand it, create a hypothesis around it, find all the supporting evidence, and then dish it up on a plate to the security or IT team, ultimately reducing triage time by up to 92%. Now, these three pillars work across the entirety of a network, whether that's in your infrastructure, if your infrastructure is on-prem, whether it's in the cloud, AWS, Azure, Microsoft, Azure, Google, or if you had a hybrid environment, whether you worked in the industrial, whether you have industrial environments, obviously IT, OT convergence is incredibly important. And then in your workforce. So now that everyone's working from home, they're relying heavily on SaaS applications, whether it's in your email and whether it's clients, so things that aren't devices that aren't necessarily on the corporate network. So it's all about giving you that full visibility so that there's nowhere to hide. Now, this point I emphasized earlier, this is our autonomous response. And this is the ability for our technology to not only to detect threat, but respond to it in real time. Now, this is so important when it comes to modern day attacks because it's harder for humans to keep up. There's a natural latency with humans. If there's an attack, you want to identify it and respond to it before it causes any real damage. But the beautiful thing about this technology is because it has an understanding of what is normal, it doesn't have to bring a sledgehammer. It can actually just sustain normal whilst dealing with an issue. That way, human teams can focus on what really matters. And when you're talking about AI-based attacks, they're going to operate at such speed and scale. The only way to defend against something that's moving so quickly is having AI moving equally as quickly to defend. And finally, where most of our customers are turning Anti-Gina on is in the email environment. And that's because we all know that 90% of threats start in the emails. And so having a technology that can understand the human as opposed just to email addresses is incredibly important. And so Anti-Gina email is a game changer. It's able to identify and neutralize sophisticated email threats because it understands the user behavior and their unique interactions via email. So there's no reliance on rules or blacklists. There's no predefined notion of what bad is. And it's not looking at any internal, external. It's looking at internal, external, but not at a single point in time. So it really forms an understanding of the normal pattern of life by identifying over 750 different metrics of every single person and every single email. You can also add in the SaaS and network data to create even more context when it comes to preventing these attacks. And these attacks that I'm talking about are the really sophisticated ones, the ones that we know are getting through at the moment with traditional toolkits. And they're spear phishing, CEO impersonations, novel malware, and supply chain takeovers, which are obviously incredibly difficult to stop. Now, I'm going to take a moment to give you guys just a couple of real-world examples before I hand it over to you to ask some questions. And I guess the two examples that I'm going to talk to you guys today are particularly interesting because they're kind of the early stages of AI-based attacks. So there's a lot of experimental malware in what I'm talking about. So this one I've got on screen now is an employee at a law firm that essentially fell victim to a spam phishing campaign. And this led to an infection of a self-propagating TrickBot malware. So if you guys don't know TrickBot, it's ultimately an information stealing malware that utilizes a worming functionality on SMB exploits, very similar to WannaCry. So what we actually identified was there was 2 infected devices that were unusually showing signs of the Empire PowerShell post-infection framework, which is commonly used by human attackers to facilitate covert hands-on keyboard attacks. But in this particular attack, it actually showed signs of malware that was experimental, as I mentioned earlier. So it actually tried to transform its data locking capabilities. So it was evidently diversifying its payload. It started by stealing banking details, and then it moved to actually ransoming this particular company by locking users out. So obviously this is the start of where AI can go, but if you throw AI into the mix, it's going to take it that one step further. It's going to basically be able to self-propagate by a series of automated decisions, and it will be able to intelligently tailor itself to the parameters of the environment it finds it in. So for example, if all the network vulnerabilities were patched, well, perhaps the malware will intelligently switch to brute forcing. Maybe it's trying to brute force some SMB credentials. Maybe it might load some Mimikatz, or maybe it installs a keylogger to capture credentials. Ultimately, it will depend on what the environment looks like and how it needs to maneuver to be most efficient and effective. So one more example, this one is quite an interesting one. It's quite common, I guess, in terms of how it actually happened. So this happened at 7:05 p.m. on a Friday evening. An employee was still working hard at a large telecommunications company. They accessed their personal email on their corporate smartphone, and they were tricked into downloading a malicious file. Obviously, this is something that happens, unfortunately, too common. Seconds later, the device began connecting to an external connector on the Tor network. But in this particular case, Darktrace discovered that a new and advanced strain of ransomware had been deployed. The attack was seemingly automated and spread faster than any ordinary ransomware. So 9 seconds after the SMB encryption activities, Darktrace raised a prioritized alert signifying that the anomaly required immediate investigation. This persisted again then over 24 seconds. And at that point, Darktrace revised its understanding of the deviation, judging it to be an active, fast-moving threat. So unfortunately, it was 7:05 p.m. on a Friday, so the security team had actually knocked off. They were done for the weekend. But fortunately, Darktrace Antigena was there because it works 24/7. So it responded autonomously and in a surgical manner. It interrupted all encryption activities and still allowing this person to work at 7 o'clock at night. So it didn't disrupt any of the normal behavior. So this attack really demonstrates how nascent automation is being leveraged as part of advanced attackers' techniques. And while this was automated and quite a powerful approach, it's just the beginning of the potential damage that AI can perform moving forward. And it's sort of, I hope this discussion sort of opens your eyes, if you're not already aware, that that's the trajectory that we're on, and that we need AI to be able to defend organizations. And hence why us at Darktrace created our technology, why we've had such success right around the globe with deploying it, and why more companies are looking to AI for defense. That is it from me, but I would love to hear from you guys in regards to questions on this. Obviously, it's a pretty interesting topic. And if not, if you guys want to see more, if you want to see the technology itself, of course, we can always catch up at a later date.
Thanks, Jared. That was fantastic. And I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing all that with us. That was very insightful. And I hope people took a lot from that. We do actually have questions for you in our Q&A, and I will ask them for you live, excuse me. So one of the questions is, why would I need Antigena email if I already have other email tools / am already using a security stack approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So often what you'll find with your email tool is that it's sitting on the perimeter. It's sitting watching all the emails come in internally, externally, and at a single point in time. So there's no additional layer once it's within the network. And probably knowing what's out there, it's using a blacklist of known bad. So what our email tool does is it sits within the inbox, and it actually is able to understand retrospectively as well as in the moment whether something is strange. It doesn't use any rules or signatures. It's purely looking at the strangeness of the email, and it's going to create, in some cases, an additional layer. But in other cases, it might be unnecessary to have that first layer in the first place if you have the AI working for you. So it's all about creating layers and making sure that you have optimum security stack. Sorry, Isaac.
Our next question is, how can Darktrace help us identify a malicious behavior in a network device? It could have a vulnerability that can be exploited, or its vulnerability has been exploited. Yeah.
So if a device has had its vulnerability exploited, yep. So it's all about behavior. Darktrace is ultimately monitoring the behavior of devices. So if a vulnerability is exploited, it's going to be doing things that are strange within the network. It's probably trying to pivot within that network on that vulnerability, and that behavior alone will be, an early indicator of threat, or it'll be, lining up like a Christmas tree, depending on the malware and how it acts. So ultimately, Darktrace is going to pick up on that in the early stages, and then depending on the severity, it will respond.
And another question that we have is, do you have an active R&D division to continuously update the AI response algorithms as ongoing new threats develop?
Yes, absolutely. Our R&D team is second to none. We've got over 30 PhD mathematicians from Cambridge working around the clock on this technology, continually updating and continually adding to this technology. When we started, it was just the enterprise immune system, and now we obviously have the AI analyst, which was a 4-year R&D project. We have the autonomous response, which came out back in 2016. So this is ever-growing challenge that we face, and
awesome.
we need to make sure that we're staying ahead of the game.
Another question that we have is, how long did it take Darktrace to start detecting the SolarWinds issue?
Yes, the SolarWinds issue. I have an amazing blog that you guys should read on this. It literally details exactly how Darktrace found SolarWinds, the SolarWinds exploit, I should say. So I will point your attention to that. It's on the Darktrace website and give a much better explanation than myself.
No, good. Does
so
it have
I'll
a
leave it
user
there.
analytics functionality?
Yeah, I guess it does, because it's not looking specifically at users, it's looking at their devices, but it will be able to identify what users are on what devices, and therefore be able to create a profile for them. So, for the email environment, certainly looking at the user itself. But for the network, it's looking at their devices. But overall, you can look up within Darktrace, you can look up users themselves if you want to do it, and it would have a profile on
Darktrace
them.
modular licensing solution? Yeah.
It's a license. So everything is obviously it's depending on what part of the platform. You can have a single part of Darktrace's platform, or you can have the entirety that creates a single pane of glass.
Quite a few questions. How does Darktrace's immune system work for users working from home, connected to home network devices like IoT, home printers, routers, etc.?
Well, it's a good question. Depending on how you guys want to deploy Darktrace, it's possible. So we have, I'm not sure if you remember the platform slide, we have client sensors, which is a small lightweight agent that you can put on devices. Now, some things like printers and whatnot, you might not need to, but what we're ultimately trying to do is protect the crown jewels, which is your SaaS applications and your network. So we will have all that covered. We'll have the devices where we can put the lightweight agent on. And so if anything tried to pivot into your network by there, as soon as it gets to those devices that are covered, they would be protected, and therefore
fantastic. And I actually have a question that I wanted to ask you that was brought up in the panel before that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Just see get your thoughts and insights on this particular area. But from Darktrace's end and from yours as well, with the experience that you have, what changes do you guys anticipate in the threatscape over the next 5 years?
Well, my whole point was around AI-based attacks, and that's obviously one that we see imminent. We really do, and we're already seeing signs of it, where attacks are going to be automated. And so right now, there's still quite a lot of interaction with humans when it comes to attacks. There's always command and control. There's always some sort of human interaction. But if you take the human out of it, it's just going to speed these attacks up to levels that we've never seen before. And so that's the idea of having something like AI cyber defense as well. So I guess that's ultimately where we see these things going. and probably
Yeah,
more
so when
exploits that
using
we've
the
seen, like the
SolarWinds, can you
SolarWinds
create
and whatnot.
alerts to the network management team if your analytics thought there is an attack?
So depending on, so if we depicted up the solar, so if the SolarWinds exploit is utilized for an attack, and we as soon as we pick up that attack, you will be notified automatically. So there's a mobile app that Darktrace has. You can set it up with a bunch of third-party ticketing systems or other third-party platforms. And you can have, or emailing as well. So a number of ways you guys can be alerted. But of course, if you've got anti-GNA, it would also be preventing it before you even
Does
need
it
to get
automatically
involved.
activate suspicious emails in a sandbox rather than relying on user activation and then reacting?
It's not. There's no sandboxing necessary within Darktrace. There's with anti-GNA, and as you deploy it, you can run it in a couple of different modes. So just handing the keys over to AI for a lot of companies can be scary. However, we build trust by showing you what it can do without actually taking action, and then as soon as you're ready as a customer to let it go, which is normally a week, maybe 2 weeks at longest, you'll basically hand the keys over to the AI and let it start doing its work. And you'll be, at that point, it's doing all of it live, and you don't really need to touch the technology
fantastic.
because the AI is doing the work for you.
That was a lot of questions, a bit of a hot seat for you. But if there's no more questions coming through from the audience, what we might do is wrap that one up. But I really appreciate you guys jumping on, and Jared for presenting today and sharing all it is that everyone needs to know about your cyber landscapes and what's taking place in the environment at the moment. And it was very insightful, and we really appreciate having you and Darktrace involved in the event and just being a supporter of the event. It's very appreciated. So thank you so much for joining us. And if there's no more questions from the audience, we might wrap that one up. But yeah, thanks so much, Jared. That was great. No problem.
Thanks,
and I'll
Isaac.
just also add,
Much
if anyone wants
appreciated.
to, if anyone has further questions post-event, I'm sure Jared doesn't mind a connection on LinkedIn. You can message him any questions that you might have, but also remember that Darktrace's resources are available in the Resale Centre, and there is links to their website so you can access them there. So any information that you may need, you can go straight to their website through our Resource Centre and find any info from there. But yeah, thanks again, Jared, and thanks for joining us. No worries. Next session, guys,
Thanks, Isaac.
is in
Appreciate
the next
it,
room. So similar to what we did moving into this one, did the same thing going into the next one, and we will see you all there very soon.